This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
In Tanzania, a tanker blast kills dozens as crowds siphon fuel. The UN condemns an attack on its staff and vows not to close its Libya mission. And we look at an exhibition in Abuja that aims to develop Nigeria's jewelry sector. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Ghana is running out of seafood due to overfishing. And in sports, debutants Proline FC of Uganda thrashed Malawi's Master Security 3-0 in their first leg tie of the CAF Confederations Cup preliminary round. We start today's program in Tanzania, where at least 60 people have been killed and 70 others wounded in a fuel tanker explosion. The regional commissioner of Morogoro says the vehicle overturned on the road 175 kilometers west of Dar es Salaam, and a crowd gathered around the overturned tanker, trying to siphon petrol from it before it exploded. The bus station serves as a major hub for passengers traveling to other parts of Tanzania and is a popular spot for bodabodas, the motorbike taxis common in the region. Burials of victims of the explosion have already begun. And let's head to Zimbabwe now, where President Emmerson Mnangagwa is optimistic about Zimbabwe's economic future, even as the country experiences an economic slowdown and hyperinflation. At the same time, the president is admitting that his time in power has not been an easy or smooth ride. However, he says progress has been made in implementing economic reforms and easing the country's international isolation. Mnangagwa replaced long-serving President Robert Mugabe in November 2017, but has not been able to lift the country out of an economic slump. Currently, Zimbabwe is experiencing 18-hour power cuts. Farai Mokotoyo reports on the presidential address.
A year after winning contested elections, President Emmerson Mnangagwa has seen his country slip into recession, return to hyperinflation, and continue to battle shortages of fuel and electricity. However, the Southern African nation's leader insists the country is on the right path and has made remarkable progress. He's highlighted the international re-engagement, which has seen the country restore relations with some Western governments and pitch itself as a destination for foreign direct investment. Under his administration, Zimbabwe has also managed to achieve a budget surplus, an unprecedented feat that he says bodes well for a bright future and that will deliver jobs and prosperity. Many in Zimbabwe had hoped to turn a new leaf after last year's polls, but economic recovery has been hampered by a drought that's left nearly half the population food insecure and a cyclone that devastated the eastern part of the country in March. Political tensions also remain high, but President Mnangagwa has begun a national dialogue which is aimed at healing the rifts. Farai Mokotoyo, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, let's go live now to Harare, where Farai Mokotoyo is standing by with more on this story. Farai, of course, the president spoke of Zimbabwe's truly remarkable progress, something of a contradiction when compared to the 18-hour power cuts and triple-digit inflation. Farai, what do people in the country make of his optimism?
Well, Lindy, I think there are mixed reactions to this optimism. Quite a number of people will be disillusioned and doubtful that indeed there has been remarkable progress. I think many people had an expectation that things would turn around very quickly. That hasn't happened, and in some cases things have become more painful. But I think where the president is coming from and where he bases his optimism is that what is happening now, these painful measures, it's necessary pain for gain in the future. He is saying that the reforms that his government is undertaking taken to realign the economy, to restore sanity, to remove subsidies, to reform the currency market. All those measures may lead to some immediate pain now, but are necessary for a brighter future. And so I think that is what he's basing his sentiment on. And so he's saying, let's go through this pain now, things will get better. But as you quite rightly say, a lot of people bearing the brunt now may not be feeling that way.
And that is the truth, isn't it? That necessary pain that many Zimbabweans will have to go through, despite the fact that the president believes the country is on the right path. Do others agree with him, though, that enough progress has been made in implementing those economic reforms and easing the country's international isolation?
Well, I think if you look at the track record, particularly on the economic and financial front, there are some success stories there. If you look at, for instance, the fiscal side and the monetary side, the moves to reform currency, the move to cut off government borrowing, those have started to yield some benefits. The government has registered a budget surplus for the first time in successive months since the third quarter of 2018. We were told by the finance minister when he presented his midterm budget that the government has realized 800 million Zimbabwe dollar, an 800 million Zimbabwe dollar surplus. He's also said the country has now been able to start servicing some of its domestic debt. It's lowered that from 9.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars to about 8.8 billion. So certainly in that regard, there is progress and in efforts to try and restore confidence in the local economy. I think what many people want to see is a quick turnaround in terms of results, but also creation of jobs, also more money being earned by people so they can spend more and get industries and businesses working more. Some of these foreign investors that are being touted, that are being invited to Zimbabwe, people would like to see those projects take off a lot quicker. Certainly organizations such as the IMF, who have given the endorsement and backing to these efforts, would give some credence to the fact that Zimbabwe is on the right path. I think what is debatable is when these dividends will start to be felt by everyone. But in terms of where we are going, I think there seems to be a good number of people who think that the right steps are being taken.
But of course, since coming into power nearly 2 years ago, Mnangagwa has faced quite a bit of criticism, particularly from opposition politicians. Do you think Mnangagwa's government has the political will to address gaps in Zimbabwe's democratic environment that could themselves contribute to economic recovery?
Well, I think, Lindy, everyone here is quite agreed that there is need for a dialogue. There is need for resolving some of the political challenges that we are facing, that once only those are resolved, then the economics will follow. And I think the president has taken a leading role in terms of inviting political rivals to come together in this political dialogue to address these challenges and to try to take the country forward. I think the biggest criticism is the fact that the political actors that have been invited do not include his main rival and his main challenger in that election last year, which is the MDC's Nelson Chamisa. He has again, during this presidential address that he made on Friday, extended an invitation to the MDC and other parties that are not part of the process to join the negotiations. So in that respect, I think the ruling party has departed from what it would have done in the past, where it would have gone it alone, would have seen an electoral victory as the right to do things and govern on its own. It has departed from that by inviting other political parties to have a say, to consult them, to participate in this dialogue. Again, as with reforms on the economic front, I think what many people are expecting to see is quicker progress, is more robust and more dramatic movements. And so what people would like to see is Nelson Chamisa and Emmerson Mnangagwa sitting down and talking as quickly as tomorrow. But that hasn't happened. And I think there are certain processes and steps that must happen for us to get to that stage. And so I think there have been some good indications by the government, but again, as with everything else, perhaps not enough progress in terms of getting to where Zimbabweans would like to see this country.
Indeed, but of course change doesn't always happen overnight. Thank you so much, Farai Makutoya, joining us there live from Harare, Zimbabwe. Now, President Mnangagwa took office in Harare, promising to turn the country around, especially the economy, and change the country's democratic path. This after 37 years of former President Robert Mugabe's rule. CGTN's Daniel Arapmoy takes a look at some of the positive steps taken so far by the new administration in Zimbabwe.
In an effort to re-engage with the world with the aim of reviving Zimbabwe's economy, President Emmerson Mnangagwa has cut new deals with Belarus, Russia and China. Mnangagwa's administration recently commissioned a South African company to supply hundreds of train wagons and locomotives worth $400 million to the National Railways of Zimbabwe, a struggling state-owned enterprise, once hailed as Southern Africa's transport beacon. Government efforts to revive industry, which currently operates at less than 50% capacity, have some hoping a better future might be possible. The Southern African country has also introduced a free state medical care for children and the elderly and a temporary reduction in fuel prices. Mnangagwa's government has also continued to promote a greater commitment to a people-centered human rights policy. While some see signs of change on the horizon, others remain skeptical as cash shortages and power crises persist. Zimbabwe's worsening power shortages have effectively turned day into night for many businesses, with most work happening well after dark when lights flicker on for a few hours.
It is a very tough time indeed, because we're having to only operate during the night where there's availability of power. Our factory here consumes a lot of electricity, and with the challenges that the country is facing at the current moment of lack of electricity and some serious load shedding, long hours, we are forced to do our production in the evenings.
Despite the challenges, President Emmerson Mnangagwa is optimistic, calling for patience, saying years of economic decline requires time to change. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Well, let's return to our top story this hour, and that is, of course, in Tanzania, a nation in mourning as many reeling still from the events of yesterday in which a fuel tanker exploded, leaving 60 people dead and at least 70 others injured. Let's bring you the very latest now on this story. We're joined by CGTN's Isaac Lukando in the town where this happened. That's in Morogoro in Tanzania. Isaac, we understand, of course, a nation that is traumatized, reeling from this traumatic event, and essentially a nation in mourning. Just tell us the latest on events in Morogoro. We understand that some burials have begun.
Yes, it is true. Burials are expected today, later on today actually, but early on today. And as we speak, the public and mourners are gathered at some grounds next to the regional hospital. These grounds have been designated for two activities. First of all, to identify bodies of loved ones. These are relatives that perhaps lost loved ones in the inferno. And secondly, for members of the public and relatives to get a chance to pay their last respects before the burials, the first set of burials that are expected later on today. According to the Minister of Policy and Parliamentary Affairs, it is expected that the first set of burials will take place today for the 64 dead, and tomorrow will be the second day of burials.
And of course, what's quite shocking in this particular incident is just the numbers of people that were injured and the number of those people that were killed. As you said, 64 people killed, at least 70 injured. How has the government responded in helping the families of those affected?
Oh, well, for the families, it's been a very traumatic period for them, coming to terms with the fact that their relatives are no longer with them, their loved ones are no longer with them. I bore witness to a family of 5 women weeping bitterly outside the hospital after learning the fact that their relative is no more. But the government has taken issue with this in an address at this event. Earlier on, not so long ago, the Prime Minister of the country, Kassim Majaliwa, said that they are now putting in effect a commission that will be tasked with investigating this whole incident and reporting next week on Friday. And the Prime Minister put it very clearly that in the event that any member of the responsible authorities is found culpable, action will be taken by the government.
Isaac Lukando, thank you so much for that update. Joining us there live from Morogoro in Tanzania. Turning now to news from Libya, a car bomb explosion in the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi has killed 3 United Nations staff. This according to several medical sources. The UN is trying to broker a truce in the capital Tripoli, where the eastern-based Libyan National Army launched a surprise attack in April. The LNA spokesperson said the 3 killed were part of the United Nations Libya mission. In all, 10 people were wounded, among them children. The explosion took place in front of a shopping mall and a bank, and at least one burnt-out UN car could still be seen at the site of the incident. The United Nations Security Council has roundly condemned those behind the car bomb attack. At the same time, the Security Council has vowed not to close its mission in Libya. Here's Daniel Arab Moy with the latest.
As residents of Benghazi milled around shells of cars that had been hit, the United Nations Security Council was convening in New York, the seat of the United Nations. The members were united in condemning the attack, in which 3 UN staff members were killed.
On behalf of the members of the Security Council, I should like to condemn in the strongest terms the outrageous, deadly and totally unacceptable attack on United Nations that occurred today in Benghazi, Libya.
The attackers hit Benghazi as locals prepared for Eid al-Adha, one of the key holidays in Islam.
This horrific attack came at a time when people in Benghazi were preparing for the Eid al-Adha holiday in an area supposedly under full security control of General Haftar's Libyan National Army forces. It serves to highlight the continued danger of terrorism across the country and the limits of effective security control in the absence of one government and one military and police force working across the country. It also confirms that this latest bout of hostilities is creating a vacuum easily exploited by radical elements that strive on chaos and violence.
Libyan representatives to the Security Council lifted a lead on the complicated situation in Libya, where forces loyal to the Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar are battling government forces for control of Tripoli.
This cowardly attack today in Benghazi comes after the abduction of a member of parliament, Ms. Siham Sergawa, 2 weeks ago. Her fate is yet to be known. All this refutes the claims that the so-called Libyan army has eradicated terrorism in Benghazi and is currently ending it in other places to cleanse Libya from terrorist groups. The truth is what is happening is the total opposite. The aggression on Tripoli and its outskirts is a genuine disaster.
But the UN says it is not pulling out of Libya, despite these threats and challenges.
The United Nations doesn't intend to evacuate from Libya. For the foreseeable future, our place remains alongside the Libyan people, like our brave colleagues who gave their lives today.
Meanwhile, Commander Khalifa Haftar has announced that his forces will be implementing a 4-day ceasefire to allow Muslims in Libya observe Eid al-Adha festivals. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN.
Let's head to the Mediterranean now, where Spanish aid boat Open Arms has rescued 39 migrants. Maltese authorities called on the aid boat for help. The Open Arms crew had been stranded for 9 days after both Italian and Maltese officials refused to let the boat disembark in their ports. Astatal has more.
Spanish aid boat Open Arms had been stranded for several days, with 121 migrants on board. Both Italy and Malta rejected requests to disembark. Then Maltese authorities asked the crew to assist in rescuing migrants stuck on a wooden structure.
Even with 121 people on board, the captain decided to rescue them. We informed Malta and rescued them.
Maltese authorities offered to take in the rescued migrants, but refused to allow those already on board to disembark. The NGO rejected the proposal, adding that the offer caused a security problem.
Around 10 hours later, a Maltese Coast Guard patrol boat appeared and informed us that they had come to pick up the 39 rescued migrants, but they didn't want to know anything about the other 121. That provoked a serious safety problem because it disrupted the coexistence of the group, which already is quite affected by the 9 days on board. The captain, in accordance to Navigation Article 184, told them to leave, that their presence was disrupting. The migrants believe that they are going to be deported to Libya.
European Parliament Speaker David Sassoli has called for member states to help migrants aboard the open arms ship. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Thousands of Muslims take part in the annual Holy Pilgrimage. And 32 dead after Typhoon Lakima sweeps through East China.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice. Thousands of Muslims are taking part in this year's Hajj pilgrimage. Muslims from around the world travel to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, the holiest Islamic site. On Sunday, the pilgrimage culminates with Muslims circling the cube-shaped Kaaba. The Kaaba signifies one's oneness with God. All those participating in the Hajj wear simple terry cloth white garments with the goal of shedding overt displays of wealth and materialism. And Muslims are also taking part in Eid al-Adha festivities. It's one of the 2 Eids held every year. Yasser Hakim looks at how Egyptians will spend the 3-day fest.
The day begins early in the morning as Muslims flock to the mosques around the country for the Eid prayers just after sunrise. In many cases, the children accompany their parents. And after the prayers, the families gather at the parks for a morning picnic.
After we finish here, I will be visiting my relatives and then take my young brother and sisters out, maybe to the movies.
The Eid in Egypt is like no other place. We finish prayer and just outside the mosque there is a DJ playing. You feel like in a carnival atmosphere. I've never seen anything like it in any Arab country. It's a lot of fun.
A morning stroll on the Nile or a boat ride is also a popular outing before the noon heat wave strikes.
To encourage social solidarity, well-off Muslims are required to sacrifice a sheep or a cow. They would keep a third of it, and the 2/3 would be distributed to the poor who cannot afford it.
Therefore, the Eid is a busy time for butchers.
The demand on sheep is less than last year. This year, we sold more cows than sheep because the meat is cheaper.
The Eid al-Adha is a 3-day vacation, but most Egyptians in the public and private sectors have been given the whole week off to enjoy the festive season. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's ban on pilgrims from the Democratic Republic of Congo due to the current Ebola outbreak has dashed the hopes of many in the country wanting to perform Hajj. CGTN's Mtongana reports.
For the last 2 years, Abu Bassam Kibanj has been looking forward to going to Saudi Arabia to perform the Muslim pilgrimage Hajj. But as the 50-year-old businessman was making final preparations, the Saudi government said no. It's banning pilgrims from the Democratic Republic of Congo because of fears over Ebola.
It pains me a lot the fact that I can't go, because I really intended to make the pilgrimage this year. But since it wasn't God's will for me to go, so I bow to His will.
The recent Ebola outbreak has killed more than 1,800 people since last year, according to Congolese health authorities, making it the second deadliest in history. But with some 1.8 million pilgrims currently in Saudi Arabia to perform Hajj, officials there are not taking any chances. Goma, where Kibanj lives, is on high alert after the first transmission of the virus was recently confirmed, raising fears the outbreak will spread within the densely populated city. His family is equally disappointed with the ban.
They shouldn't have refused them to go, but they should have rather tested them, and if they were found infected people, then they should have told them to stay, and those who are not infected should have been allowed to go.
Around 3% of Congo's population is Muslim, according to polling by the New York-based Congo Research Group. And while people from sub-Saharan Africa make about 10% of annual pilgrims, Congo's Muslims will have to wait to perform the mandatory religious duty of retracing the route Prophet Muhammad took 14 centuries ago. Mtongana, CGTN.
Ugandans may not be among the world's biggest carnivores, but there sure is a huge love affair with meat in the country. From meat festivals to the popular evening spots, there is an unwavering enthusiasm for meat, as Leon Sinyange reports.
The chicken, the beef and the pork all make for the savory sight. Meat festivals are now the in thing in Uganda.
People roast in a different way, they spice in a different way. So here you get to taste on, different kinds of, roasting or grilling or spicing.
Barbecues are also an evening staple for many. David Owekamu has been roasting pork for 15 years now. He never runs out of customers.
The quality is what matters in life. And again, it is affordable. For almost everybody, doesn't matter the class.
According to Uganda's Bureau of Standards, Uganda's meat consumption is estimated at over 10 kilograms per person a year. That number could be growing. Beef and chicken are the regulars in several homes, but finding out from some Ugandans what their favorite type of meat would be, the answer's completely unshocking.
Pork, because it's delicious. Especially from these guys of Chadwanda.
God, man, God. The ribs, barely as fat. And if you go to the north, it's all God, so.
Ugandans have also picked up other forms with traditional and foreign meat culinary experiences. And much for the love of meat, the indulging continues. Leon Sinyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Now let's turn to the latest on the super typhoon Lakima. The typhoon is now moving up further north, leaving a trail of destruction since making landfall on China's eastern coastal province of Zhejiang. 32 people have been killed and another 16 remain missing. Torrential rains have also hit neighboring Shanghai municipality and Jiangsu province. The typhoon has affected more than 5 million people and halted flights, ferries and train services. Over 1 million people have been relocated. Lakima is expected to make a second landing along the coastline in Shandong later today. Meanwhile, emergency operations are being carried out throughout the affected regions where Lakima has brought life-threatening rainstorms and floods. Zhang Dan has more.
What's it like when your life is hanging on the line? That is literally the case in Shayan village in Ningbo in eastern China. Torrential rains brought by Typhoon Lakima flooded the entire village, stranding more than 600 people. Rescuers are racing to bring them to safety.
So far, we have sent out more than 30 search and rescue teams throughout the city, and all of our rescue forces are now at the front line.
A young couple and their 1-year-old daughter were found trapped when rescuers arrived. Rising water levels blocked vehicles and large equipment. Rescuers had to work by hand. Zhejiang's capital, Hangzhou, saw heavy rainstorms Saturday night. 2 of its towns were struck by landslides and mudslides, damaging roads and power lines. Zhejiang province has been hard hit. Typhoon Lakima has put close to 5 million people there in danger, and over 1 million people have been evacuated. Zhang Dan, CGTN.
Well, in other weather-related news, 115 people have been killed after severe floods hit much of India. The worst affected area is the southern state of Kerala, from where 57 deaths have been reported. Over 500,000 people have been evacuated from the inundated areas in all these states and rehabilitated in relief camps. Rains are predicted to worsen in the coming days. In response, the local government has sent military teams and aircraft to help with the relief effort. India's monsoon rains are crucial for replenishing the nation's water supplies, but they do kill hundreds of people every year. Well, let's take a short break now. Your business news up next. Coming up, Ghana is running out of seafood due to overfishing. And the AFDB is working to transform infrastructure and boost the economy in Côte d'Ivoire.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are 2 of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Overfishing is devastating Ghana's sea territory. The United Nations estimates that nearly 10% of the country's total population depend heavily on the crucial sector. But now, in attempts to preserve its fish stocks, the Ghanaian government has temporarily shut down fishing for industrial trawlers. From Accra, here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai.
Fishermen at Jamestown Beach in Accra have just returned from fishing. They didn't catch much, even though this period is the best time for fishing.
Things are bad these days. We went fishing since last night, but came back with just a few catch and lots of plastic waste in our nets.
Ghana's coastlines have been devastated by the side effects of economic expansion. According to campaign group the Environmental Justice Foundation, pollution and overfishing is responsible for the depletion of 1/3 of fish species here. Experts estimate that these practices off the coast of West Africa cost the affected countries around $1 billion a year. The government banned fishing for artisanal fishermen from May to June in order to preserve stocks. It has also banned industrial trawlers from fishing between August and September. These industrial vessels are blamed for the overfishing.
This is one big measure that we are trying to do, to revamp our dwindling stocks. Other measures are to ensure that all the fishing vessels or the canoes comply with our regulations, our fisheries laws, so that they stay away from illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing.
Ghana had to import $135 million worth of fish in 2016 because of depleted domestic stocks.
The fishing industry in Ghana is critical to the country's economy and the food needs of its people. But experts say the use of illegal nets, which indiscriminately catch juvenile fish before they spawn, is becoming more widespread. And those destructive methods are depleting fish stocks.
Experts say the 2-month ban for industrial trawlers may not necessarily yield the desired results.
We have a challenge in terms of how we plan it and how we are executing it. And so you are not able to get the benefits immediately. Because you see, the trawl sector is going on closure between August and September, and artisanals are fishing. So even if the fish move to shallow waters to spawn, because the artisanals are fishing, you are not likely to feel the impact. If you had a general closure for everybody, you are likely to do some measurement of the impact.
Amalfio says he wants the government to invest more in fishing sector research to effectively tackle the country's depleting fish stocks.
We don't have a research vessel. We don't have adequate research. We lack the technology. Even the gears that we use, we don't have a gear lab. We don't have gear technologies and all that. We need a lot of policy direction, because these are policy things.
Emmanuel Latte wants the government to do all it can to fix the country's depleting fish stock soon. He says he and the estimated 3 million people in Ghana whose livelihood depends on fishing don't want to lose their main occupation. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
The African Development Bank has been working on a massive project to drastically improve transport in Côte d'Ivoire's capital, Abidjan. The aim is to transform the city's infrastructure as well as facilitate economic activities. Well, CGTN's Penina Kariba caught up with Marie-Laure Akin-Ologbade from the African Development Bank to find out whether the transport project, estimated to have cost just over $860 million, is on track to meet its 2021 deadline.
Today, we expect that the deadline will be met, and maybe with even some good prospect that this bridge could be delivered ahead of time.
What is the expected impact of this project once it's complete?
We think that this is a bridge that is going to significantly enhance all the urban function in Abidjan, but it will also, of course, significantly reduce the congestion. During the processing of the project, our teams estimated that the annual cost of lack of efficiency in the public transport system could cost about 5% of the GDP to the country. So we believe that with this type of infrastructure, once completed, we will have a significant reduction in this cost. The project is really meant to link up the west side of the city of Abidjan, and we are linking this western part to the eastern part, which is the direction basically to Ghana and Burkina Faso. So this whole corridor also has also a regional dimension, in the sense that we are going to be able to transport goods from the port of Abidjan all the way to the hinterland countries of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. We also see a lot of impacts in terms of the environment, and for that we have actually partnered with the Green Environment Fund, who is providing some financing to this project, about $7 or $8 million, because they are particularly interested in the reduction of greenhouse emission, of course. And here in this project, we have calculated that we are maybe probably about 1 million ton that could be saved on an annual basis.
Are there any other projects you're focusing on outside of Abidjan?
In Côte d'Ivoire, we have a portfolio of about $2.2 billion in total. This is a portfolio that has significantly grown in the last 3-4 years. It has been multiplied by, I think, between 2013 and 2018, this portfolio has been multiplied actually by 8. And in this portfolio, we do a lot of transport infrastructure, but not just actually roads, but also we are now investing and we are looking at, for example, airport, airline industry, which is another mode of transport that is critically needed in West Africa. And this is about 50%. 50% of all that we do in Côte d'Ivoire is around the transport infrastructure development. And then about 25% is energy. And here we are working both in terms of generation, but also in connection, distribution. And then the third, but not the least, and this is an area that is growing. I must say that 3-4 years ago, agriculture was not such a big area of emphasis for us in Côte d'Ivoire. And we are now investing big in the agriculture sector, and really through what we call the spatial agro-industrial processing zone. So we are really exploring this idea and actually already implementing it in a number of areas.
Infrastructure development is one of the key focus areas for the bank, and we've seen China as well champion the Belt and Road Initiative, a big deal here in the African continent. How does the bank work with China in regards to infrastructure development?
The bank has a very good relationship with China. As you know, China is a shareholder of the bank and is also a major donor of the African Development Fund. So this is a relationship, and we have a very strong support actually from China. And this support is not only in terms of being members of both the African Development Bank and the fund, but also by the provision of a $2 billion facility, which is called the Africa Growing Together Fund, which is a facility that basically the bank administers on behalf of China and in co-financing projects that have been identified by the bank.
Chinese electronics company Xiaomi is continuing to expand in the Kenyan market. The company launched its second Kenyan store in the capital, Nairobi. Now, Xiaomi is most popularly known for their smartphones, but Kenyans will have access to a wide range of other products. The Beijing-based company is looking to expand their reach with not only physical stores, but with an e-commerce platform too. Let's take a short break now. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, an exhibition in Abuja aims to develop Nigeria's jewelry sector.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The African Gems and Jewelry exhibition has opened in the Nigerian capital, Abuja, with exhibitors showcasing their finest jewels to potential investors. But as CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports, Nigeria has yet to benefit financially from trade in its gemstones.
A runway display of some of Nigeria's jewelry and precious stones. Jewelers, gemstone miners, marketers and industry experts have come from all over Africa to showcase the vast diversity of Nigerian and African gems and designs. The idea is to stimulate trade in the sector enough to contribute significantly to Nigeria's GDP. Gemologist Jessica Ogeva is one of the exhibitors here. She started hand-making her jewelry 6 years ago, and now her brand has gone beyond the shores of Nigeria.
We've been able to have customers from the UK, from different countries in Africa, as well as even from China.
Precious stones like emerald, zircon and sapphire are among several that could be money spinners for the country. But strict mining policies has given rise to illegal mining activities. Despite having one of the largest deposits of gemstones in the world and in very large commercial quantities, Nigeria is still losing up to $3 billion yearly to unofficial trade in gemstones. The solid mineral industry contributes a meager 0.3% to the country's GDP, a status industry players want to see change.
The missing link is, again, governance. We need to identify, and we are beginning to do that this is a private sector driven sector. It's a business, it's not government. We want to remove discretion. Use technology to drive everything, what they call the single window. So you can apply, everybody knows what you have, and it's done. Then government gets its own revenue, to make your money, and the business is done, and everybody's happy.
Without much government involvement, mining and trades in gemstones are likely to remain stunted. Global projections for the industry is estimated at 4.73% growth a year and could be worth over $443 billion by 2020. The exhibition is focusing on developing the sector to improve processes along the value chain and birth great African brands that could compete globally. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Africa is the cradle of evolution. However, the trail is often hard to track because of limited efforts in securing and protecting archaeological records in East Africa. Kenya's National Museum in Nairobi struggles to create space for freshly unearthed remains, as well as organize and catalog precious unmarked pieces among its historical files. Beryl Oro brings us that report.
The National Museum of Kenya's Paleontology Department has a collection unrivaled in East Africa and one of the world's great fossil treasures.
This is a skull of a modern crocodile, and I want to show you at about 3 million years the kind of crocodiles that used to exist during that time.
Though celebrated, the Institute faces a great challenge. The main wing has changed little since legendary paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey first started stockpiling his finds there in the early 1960s. Now, the space is packed with evidence from the past. Between 7,000 and 10,000 new fossils arrive at the lab every year. Gigantic skulls of ancient crocodiles compete for space with bygone species of horned giraffe, while the tusks of early African elephants take up valuable real estate. Even the windowsills are littered with petrified remains of all manner of wonderful creatures.
It shows the wealth of Africa in terms of our past ecosystems and what used to be in Africa, and we can do reconstructions of the environment from these, the possible diets from these, and what other animals they would have interacted with.
Including the only known remains of a prehistoric mega-carnivore larger than a polar bear that researchers only this year declared a new species. Locally known as Simbakubok Toka Africa, whose unveiling made headlines around the world, though it lived in a nondescript drawer in downtown Nairobi. Though first excavated on a dig in western Kenya in the early 1980s, an enormous backlog further burdened by limitations among professionals in the already short-staffed field locally, the mega-carnivore went unrecognized and hidden for years.
And 99% of those people who work here are foreigners, foreign people.
So it will be important for people in Kenya to understand the importance of this to the country and venture or study things to do with human origins and evolution.
The prevailing less than prestigious attitude against paleontology has created limitations in the field, not to mention the lack of other archaeological specialists and limited financing. The museum staff, however, hope to update the storage systems and adopt new technology like the micro-CT scan that would allow for a fresh look at the museum's most forgotten corners where possible links to old stories lie. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And here's a look at what's coming up in your sports news.